A question that I frequently get asked by people is, where exactly do I buy all my Digimon merchandise and various virtual pets like Tamagotchi and of course Digimon? So I thought that I would finally go about making a video basically going over all the places that I do or do not recommend in terms of storefronts or online places to get virtual pets and other pieces of Digimon merchandise. So before I go into it, this video isn't sponsored by any website or storefront or proxy service. I have been sponsored by those in the past, but this video is not a sponsored piece. I'm not getting any money for this from any of the places that I'm about to recommend. These are just places that I have used or had some experience with in some way, and the ones that I would actually recommend, not just because I've been sponsored by them. This is not a sponsored video at all. This is just me recommending places that I've used and storefronts that I've used and proxy services, etc. So I just thought that I'd get that out of the way just in case you're thinking that I'm being paid to promote anything here, which I'm not. Just whatever YouTube ad was in this video, I guess, but that's not directly influencing my opinion here. These are just what I think are the good ones and ones that I've used, not because they've promoted or sponsored me in any way. So something else I want to get out of the way is that this is not a complete list, obviously. There are obviously places other than the ones that I'm about to talk about that you can get virtual pets. These are just my main go-tos in terms of places to buy Digimon and virtual pets and etc, etc. So that's basically everything I wanted to get out of the way, so let's get into it. First of all, older virtual pets and older pieces of Digimon merchandise are a little bit harder to come by nowadays, especially with the way that the online market seems to be going, with a lot of people flipping prices that are good. Like, they'll buy something cheap and then flip it for 3 times as much, which is a terrible thing to do, and you shouldn't do that, unless of course you need the money, of course. But if you're just doing it for greed, naughty, don't do that. That's a silly thing to do. Go do something else. The virtual pet market is not a fun place to be at the moment, and it's not very newcomer friendly. So in terms of places to get older virtual pets and older pieces of Digimon merchandise, if they were Japanese exclusives, I'd recommend using a proxy service to look for these items. I'll go over more about proxy services in the later bit of this video when I talk about new places to get new releases, but in terms of old releases for Japanese ones, that's probably your best case, is to use a proxy service. They're a lot cheaper than eBay. I would strongly recommend against using eBay for older Japanese releases. Everything has a markup, and you also run the risk of buying from what is called a dropship, or I feel like there's a better term for that, but I've heard the word dropship being used the most. And essentially, my understanding of that concept is that this isn't necessarily someone who lives in Japan. This is someone who lives somewhere, and they are going to actually go to a proxy service like Buyee or From Japan, and they are going to buy that thing for you. And then they're going to pay that money, and they're going to pay all the fees, and then they're going to ship it off to your place, rather than they have it and then they send it out. So if you've ever been on eBay and then noticed a listing that's on somewhere in Japan, like Rakuten or Mercari or somewhere, they will have the exact same picture, the exact same listing. It's not necessarily that it's the same person. It might just be someone who is going to buy that listing and then send it to you. So that's kind of an annoying thing, because you're paying basically sometimes 3 times the price of it, which, depending on how bad the proxy service fees are to your country, that might be completely reasonable, or it could be not so reasonable. So I recommend against eBay for Japanese releases. Of course, if you're looking for English releases, such as either releases from America or Europe, or Southeast Asian and Australian releases, basically your only bet, if not eBay, and of course you can get lucky on eBay, you can get lucky on eBay for Japanese releases, it's just rare, your other bet is to use local marketplaces such as Facebook Marketplace, such as Gumtree Australia, You can, of course, sign up for a Gumtree Australia account and see if a seller is going to ship internationally. It's just not super common to find someone who does that. I'm obviously in Australia, so I can't really speak from experience there. But if you're looking for specifically an Australian release, you're best to look at local to Australia marketplaces, Facebook groups, Gumtree Australia, those sort of sites like that. You can, of course, join Facebook buy-sell groups and set out a sort of wanted ad or see if anyone's selling those things. You can also try online forums like With the Will. I've bought things from people on With the Will before. That's how I got my Pendulum Original 2.5. So that's also an option there. So, and that's also for Japanese releases, new and old as well. You can go on forums. Like that's not a new concept. That's just something I'd recommend doing for those older things, because the market's not typically newcomer friendly at the moment. So those are my recommendations for the older releases. So now let's get into where to pick up the new releases. Of course, these are also going to be on eBay, but again, for about 3 times the price as you can buy from other places that I'm going to be mentioning. So again, just to reiterate, not sponsored by any of these, and this is where I'm going to start actually name dropping places that you can buy these from that aren't just vague places like eBay or Gumtree, etc. Of course, for non-Japanese modern releases, you can probably just buy these in store. Digital Monster 20th, DMX, etc. You can actually just go to a store and go buy them. That's cool. And of course, there's also Amazon. I don't really use Amazon too much. A lot of the good priced ones are Amazon US rather than Amazon Australia. But that is also an option, just not one that I've used very much because the prices aren't as good for an Australian. So first up, we have HobbyLink Japan, which I have been using HobbyLink Japan for decades. I'm fairly certain they've been around the longest out of all of these that I'm about to mention. They offer pay later, they're located in Japan, and they are very fast. They will typically ship something out to you before the release date. Like, they'll basically get it, and they'll prepare your shipment, and then typically it'll ship out before that release date. However, the downside is that, at least to Australia, shipping from HobbyLink Japan can be rather costly, but that feels like a me thing. You can, of course, go for cheaper options, but I tend to go for either EMS or DHL, which can be rather costly. But more or less, I recommend HobbyLink Japan. They have a private warehouse, so you can buy things and then have them all just wait there for a month or two, and then you can ship them out. Of course, during COVID, because a lot of different courier services weren't available to certain countries, they actually made that an endless waiting time that something can live in the warehouse. So you could have things for months be in their private warehouse before shipping it out. I believe that now it might be reverted back to 2 or 3 months. But still, super handy if you do want to make a large shipment and every release that you want is a few months apart in terms of a release date. So very much recommend them. I do like a pay later option. Not many of these places do offer pay later. I'm a big fan of it because you can kind of help yourself budget. If something just comes up for pre-order and you didn't really expect it, you can say pay later, and then you can kind of factor that in for whatever budget you have for that month, rather than paying it up front. So, big fan of a pay later option, and it also makes them easy to recommend because sometimes people do like that pay later option when they are getting something pre-order, especially if they're a little bit of an anxious buyer. I know I am when I'm first using a service for the first time. I don't like putting money down straight away on the basis that if it is a scam, or if it just disappears, like Nippon Yasan did. Nippon Yasan was very good prior to COVID. COVID kind of hit them in a really bad way. They had a lot of delays, and then they just disappeared. So, I get kind of nervous because what if a place has disappeared? So if I'm paying up front, I don't want to have to lose money. But if I'm paying on release, then I'll be able to do a refund from PayPal or something, because there's usually a little bit of a few months that you have, like a few month window to do that. So if you're a nervous buyer, I do like the option to pay on release. Another one which I should mention that I haven't actually used this yet. I mean, I've used it, but it hasn't come to the release day yet, so I am in the process of using it, but it's one that's been recommended quite a lot, and that is Hobby Genki. It feels, honestly, a little bit too similar to Nippon Yasan, which I just mentioned, which does fill me a little bit with concern, but it reminds me of Nippon Yasan prior to 2020, which is a good thing. I loved Nippon Yasan from 2015, I think it was, to obviously 2020, where things started to go downhill. So, Hobby Genki, there we are. Very similar name to Hobby Link Japan, and a sort of similar website. So this has been recommended to me by a lot of people, and they're people that I can trust, so I'm kind of just recommending them on their behalf. But again, I haven't used them, I'm in the process of using them, but it's kind of a new website to me. They do offer pay later, which is very handy, like Hobby Link Japan, and they are located in Japan, like Hobby Link Japan. So I can't really speak for what the shipping costs are or how fast they are in sending something out. The people that have recommended Hobby Genki to me have said that they are fast in shipping things out. So that's something that is good, but again, I can't speak through my own experience. I just thought that I'd mention Hobby Genki here because it's something that's been recommended to me, especially recently. They also have Premium Japan items. Hobby Link Japan doesn't seem to list Premium Bandai Japan items rather. So that is something that is a pro for Hobby Genki. Next up, we have Japan You Want. I've mentioned Japan You Want many, many times. They are a good service, and I recommend them and have done for a few years, but lately their prices after release, as in not pre-order, the thing has already been released, it's already out in the world, seems to be honestly a little bit higher than it should be, and they're still good for pre-orders, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for things that have already released. There was also a little bit of a weird thing that we were noticing sales from within Japan disappearing and then them being seemingly relisted on Japan You Want for a lot more. So it kind of feels like that they've started to flip local sales, which is kind of a shame. They feel like they're contributing a little bit to the market and its decline. In addition, I have noticed that shipments have been slower than they used to be. Shipments on pre-orders used to release on release day or even earlier, and now they seem to be a few days after. The Lugumon BEM, for example, released on the 24th, Japan You Want gave me shipment notification on the 27th, and DHL picked it up on the 29th. Whereas a few years ago, such as the Tamagotchi Smart release, I found that the order actually arrived on Japanese release day. So it was shipped out prior to release day, so it arrived actually on release day in Australia. So that's pretty cool, but not anymore. They seem to have slowed down in terms of their shipments. There is, of course, the fact that shipping is very cheap on huge orders. Very much appreciate that. Sometimes on proxies, the shipping for multiple items can be just unfair, but Japan You Want has fairly low prices for their shipping, which is always great, especially since they use DHL, which sometimes, especially with Hobby Link Japan, can be expensive, but Japan You Want seems to have fairly low shipping rates, so big fan of that. And of course, they're located in Japan, so that does add to them being fast, but again, lately, not so much. And then, of course, we have Zen and TCG, which I have been sponsored by before, but not this video, so this is my opinion, not what I've been paid to say, and I really love Zen and TCG. When I say that as part of the ad reads, that's not just me saying that because I'm being paid, it's my actual thoughts and feelings about this web store. They are also very passionate, and they're also very friendly. They are Digimon fans themselves, so it feels like you're more buying from somebody who cares about the franchise rather than someone who cares about the money. So that is a huge plus. They are a fairly new storefront, so they're still finding their footing, and lately they've been a lot faster than they were previously, as they were previously at the mercy of whenever Bandai Japan would send them stock, but their shipping dates lately are closer to the Japanese release dates than they were last year. Big fan of that. I'm glad that they've sped up. They aren't based in Japan, they're based in Singapore, so they have to wait for the release to get from Japan to Singapore, but also sometimes Premium Bandai Japan or just Bandai send them at a slightly slower pace because they are newer, they are a smaller storefront. So that is a shame, but lately I've noticed they are a lot closer to release date, which is a huge plus because it makes them easier to recommend. A lot of people are quite impatient with their pre-orders, even me. I'm very impatient. I want my things as soon as possible, and that's not a weird thing. That is just everyone wants their things as soon as possible. So it is nice that I can recommend them and say that they are faster than they have been previously. Obviously not as fast as Hobbylink Japan or any storefronts that are actually in Japan, but still they are much faster than they used to be. And also, it's nice to support a small, passionate group of fans running a store. That feels good. So, big fan of that. There is, of course, the shipping, which to Australia is quite expensive, but otherwise, I love Zen and TCG, basically. And then, of course, we have proxy services. I have been sponsored by Bai before. I haven't been sponsored by From Japan before. But again, not sponsored in this video. These are my opinions about these proxy services. So they're obviously located in Japan. That's the point of a proxy service. And the short of what a proxy service is that they are in Japan. They will buy the listing for you, and then they will keep it in their warehouse, and then you choose to ship it out to you. You have to pay them before they buy the thing, and then so that's called charge 1. And then when it arrives, when you want to ship it out to you, you have to pay something called charge 2, which is all the fees and the shipping expenses. Now, the fees and the shipping expenses can be quite costly. This is something to keep in mind because it can hit you quite hard financially, especially because you're not really given a quote for the charge 2 when you get the charge 1. You have sort of an idea, but this can be kind of a surprise to see the final cost. So that's something to be mindful of, that can be kind of surprisingly high. I think the most I paid for a charge 2 was 600 Australian. It was a huge order, but that was the highest cost, the lowest cost being about 70 Australian. And that's shipping and fees. Obviously I'm Australian, that's Australian dollars. And we also have GST, so that's 10% on every single thing that you purchase added on to the end. So if you buy 10 things that are $100 each, that is $100 extra that you have to pay. Obviously that number goes up because 10% off bigger numbers is a bigger number. Quick maths for you there. So overall, I do recommend proxy services, but because of how hard the fees can hit, especially if you're an Australian, I recommend them only if you can't buy something from any of the other places that I've mentioned. My go-tos being Hobbylink Japan, then Zen and TCG, and then Japan You Want is kind of like just in case, or if that's the cheapest option for me. So proxy services are most likely the fastest option from the ones I've listed here. Hobbylink Japan is also probably one of the fastest options because they get it and then they send it to you. This one, they kind of get it, they have to sort it into the right person, and then they send it to you once you tell them to. So that's basically all the places that I recommend for both new and old Digimon virtual pets. So let me know your thoughts, comments, questions, etc. in the comment section below. If there's anything that I haven't mentioned or you need more information on, feel free to ask me. Or if you yourself have a place you recommend, let me know in the comment section below. Tell me why you recommend it. Love hearing about new places. Like this video if, I don't know, you like the way you like how many times I probably said the word probably, absolutely, and obviously, I think I said probably like 50 times. But anyway, like this video for that, I guess. Subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, I will see you on the next video. Bye!